Hello, welcome to Agile Writer Critique. I'm your host, Greg Smith, founder of Agile Writers. Through the years working at the Agile Writer Workshop and working with hundreds of authors, we've come up with some rules about how to conduct ourselves during critique, and I wanted to share those rules with you today and make sure that when you do your critiques that you benefit from our experiences. Now, I may move through these slides at a fairly brisk pace, don't worry. If I'm going too fast, just use the video player controls at the bottom of this window to stop the video and rewind if necessary. So the first thing to think about is, why are you doing critique? You need to get feedback on your work. You need to try and get a first impression from other people about what you've written, and you'll want a second opinion. Your opinion is good, but a second opinion from someone who's not your mom or your spouse or significant other will be invaluable to you. You want an opinion from someone who is unbiased. Through critique, you will learn a few things. You'll learn some things about spelling and grammar, although those are not the most important things. You'll also learn about story elements like plot, character, and point of view. You'll want to improve your craft through receiving criticism, but you'll also improve your craft through offering criticism. As an overview, we'll talk about formatting your work, how to send your work to your partners, how to read your partner's work, how to make comments about structure, and how to conduct yourself at the critique meeting. You might think that formatting is not that important, but it turns out that it's very important. You don't want to try and print your work out as a monolithic stream of single-spaced lines. You want to try and create a manuscript with nice double-spaced lines and 1-inch margins, so there's plenty of room for your critique partner to write in. Also, you'll want to use a clean 12-point font so that it looks presentable and is easy to read. When you set up your word processor with these parameters, you'll average about 250 words per page. At Agile Writers, we write 10 pages a week, which is about 2,500 words a week. You'll want to put a nice header on each page. The header should contain a working title, the author's name, and also the chapter number or title. In the footer, you'll want to put a page number and the total number of pages in the file. We also recommend that you have just one file for each critique. One of the things that we've run into is people who send their entire manuscript to their critique partners and then direct them to critique a range of pages. We think this is a bad idea. A couple of things happen. One is that the critique partners get confused as to which version of the manuscript they're supposed to be using. Another thing that happens is that the author may say, check out pages 51 through 63, and then it's up to the critique partner to figure out how to print only those pages. What we recommend is that you create one file for each critique. Here's an example of what that might look like. You can see at the top, this is from my book, Luddite Planet. There's a name of the book, the author, and the chapter title. Everything's double-spaced, and you can see 1-inch margins all around, so there's plenty of white space for making comments. At the bottom, we see the page numbers, page 1 of 4. This does a number of things for us. For one thing that it does is that you know whose work it is. If you're the critique partner, you've got two other people's work in your hands and you're walking to your critique meeting and you drop your pages on the ground, you need to pick them up and put them back together again. And it can get difficult or confusing to know which page goes where. These formatting guides will help. Even during the critique meeting, the critique partner needs to know whose work it is that they're working with. Having the header makes it clear which pages go with which critique. Let's talk about page numbers. You need to keep the pages in order. Once again, if your critique partner has dropped the pages or needs to put them back into order again, your page numbers will help do that. We've also seen that if your critique partner has stapled the pages together or printed it out double-spaced, then when they go to the critique meeting itself and they're trying to say, look at page number 3, without those page numbers on the bottom, it's hard for you to synchronize with them and for you to know which page they're trying to give you their critique from. Also, by putting the chapter name at the top, it lets the critique partner know where they are in the story. This format is also easy to read because of all the white space. Okay, sharing your work. One thing we recommend is one file for each critique. You want to send that file as an email attachment, or you can use some sort of file sharing system that stores your files in the cloud. We have used Dropbox.com with pretty good success. Dropbox is an online service that is free and allows you to share files with other people. You can share folders with your critique partners, and whatever you drop into that folder shows up in their desktop, and they can then read it. If that sounds a bit too complicated, we find email attachments work just fine. You should agree on a time frame submitting your work to your critique partners. We find 3 days to be sufficient. It's very rude to send the work out the night before it's to be critiqued. We've actually had people send an email the morning of the critique. It doesn't give your critique partners enough time to print the work out and go through it and give you a good review. As I said, we found 3 days to be sufficient. We will send out 10 pages on Sunday night to be critiqued on the following Wednesday. You should agree on how many pages you're going to critique each week. We found that 10 pages works pretty well. We only submit pages written since the last meeting. We don't resubmit pages. If you've received a critique and you updated the last 10 pages, you don't need to bring them back for a re-critique. It just makes too much time and slows down your progress. You want to constantly move forward. Again, once the work is critiqued, don't bring it back. We don't resubmit work. You want to constantly move forward and not dwell on the last work that you did. If the story changes significantly due to a rewrite, go ahead and write a summary paragraph for your partners and update your storyboard. If you find that you're updating your storyboard quite a bit, you might want to consider taking a break and going back and looking at your storyboard and making sure your story is the way you want it to go. When you're reviewing the work before you get to the critique meeting, read the work from beginning to the end and make comments as you go. Now, what we recommend is that you print the work out and start writing right in the margins. Make comments about spelling and grammar on the paper, but don't talk about them at the meeting. If you see a semicolon where there should be a colon or a comma, go ahead and mark that on the page, but don't spend any time talking about it at the critique meeting. You have much more important things to worry about. We firmly believe that things like spelling and grammar can be fixed in the second draft and can also be sent to an editor for fixing. Don't reformat the pages as you go. It confuses the pagination. We've had people actually write their comments in the body of the text by typing it into the document. And what it does is it pushes all the text down so that a 10-page chapter turns into 12 or 13 or 15 pages. So at the meeting, when you say, look at page 5 and the author has the original work, your page 5 is now their page 3, and there's a whole lot of confusion about where you are. If you're reading along and you get confused about what's going on in the story, go ahead and make a comment about that right away. Sometimes people think that they can figure that out if they read further along, but the author may not have intended that confusion. Likewise, when you do get that confusion cleared up, make a note of it in the margin where it happens. That may be what the author had in mind. Don't go back and reconcile those comments. Like if you're confused on page 3 and on page 5 it all becomes clear, you don't have to go back and erase your earlier comment, but you can make a comment on page 5 saying, now I see what you're doing. By the end of the review, write a short paragraph about your overall impressions. Let the author know what you like and what you didn't like. By the way, there's this thing called track changes in Microsoft Word. Track changes is a capability for you to make comments in the document itself, and they show up in the printed in the margins. It's really a handy feature if you have Microsoft Word and you know how to use track changes. It's a great way of marking up the document and sharing it with the author without actually having to print the document out and mark it up by hand. However, whether you're marking up the work by pen or if you're using track changes, you should print your work out and bring it to the critique meeting. This is a picture of what it looks like to use Microsoft Word's track changes. As you can see here, I've highlighted a bit of text, and over on the right is where the comment shows up and says, shouldn't this be in italics because it was the computer that was talking. It's a very handy feature, this track changes. You can just mark up the text. It doesn't change the pagination, which is awesome. You can write your comments in a readable form, something better than handwriting. If you have bad handwriting like mine, that's definitely a plus. As a critique partner, your comments should be honest, and that's really important. Many people try to sugarcoat their comments. They try to tell the author that they've done great work and that they don't need any improvement. That's doing a disservice to the author. You really need to let them know what's wrong with their work without getting personal. Your comments should be positive and constructive. We've had people say, I think this is a stupid idea, or you must be insane, or this is a ridiculous premise. These are not the positive, constructive criticisms we're looking for. Look for things that will be more affirmative. If you find something that you don't understand, just ask a question. I don't understand why you selected crossbows here. In fact, we had this situation where an author had written an alternative history, and he had the Canadian Mounties keeping their people in line with crossbows. The critique partner didn't like that and started writing down alternatives for the crossbows. We think this is crossing the line. As a critique partner, you want to give good, honest critique and let the author know when you've got a problem with their work. But at the same time, you don't want to write the work for them. That's pretty much how we draw the line. When you start giving advice that's unsolicited, you're now problem solving, and that's outside the purview of you as a critique partner. On the flip side of that, if one of the critique partners says, I don't like crossbows, and then the author asks, what do you think would be better? Here the author has opened the door, and it's appropriate to make some suggestions. Remember to comment only on the work, never comment on the writer. That should be obvious, but we have had situations where people started asking questions about the intelligence of the author. That's just not helpful. Okay, when you get to the meeting, the first thing you should do is think about how much time you have for critique. We usually allow 60 minutes for critique, and if you divide that by the number of people, so if there are 2 of you, that's 30 minutes apiece. If there are 3 of you, that's 20 minutes apiece. We recommend 3 critique partners for each group. We've worked with groups of 4, but that gets kind of dicey when you only have 15 minutes for each critique. This should be obvious, but you should focus on the work one person at a time. Let critique partner A go for 20 minutes, then critique partner B. Focus on the work with no idle conversation. Save that socializing for after the meeting. I know how it is. Writers are very isolated in the type of work that we do, and we get to see our friends, and all you want to do is talk about the events of the last week and what your grandchildren did and things like that. But you only have so much time to do your critique, and you want to save that socializing for after the meeting. Oh, don't try to review the work cold at the meeting. We've had people do this where, for whatever reason, they didn't have time to do their critique, and they're showing up and trying to read the work while sitting there and give comments about the work while they're sitting at the table. That's just rude. You really need to come prepared, and if you can't come prepared, then be upfront about it and say, I wasn't able to critique your work. Promise then to do the critique and to send your notes to them as an email as soon as you can. Try not to read the work at the last minute or at the table. It's just rude. As the writer being critiqued, there are some things that you should do. First off, for the most part, you should remain silent. Just let the critique partners tell you what they thought. Now, if you're asked a question by one of the critique partners, then it's appropriate for you to comment on it, but don't defend your choices. Sometimes, as in the case of the crossbow, the critique partner should only say, I don't like that you use crossbows here. I thought it was archaic. The author then gets defensive and starts saying, well, I've done a lot of research on crossbows and I know a lot about this topic. I really think that Mounties would have used crossbows. It's not that important. What's important is that you receive the note and that you process it. Don't be defensive. Think about saying thank you every time somebody gives you a piece of advice. It's free advice, but it's still very valuable. I suggest that you treat your critique as a gift your friends give you. It's a favor that they're doing for you, and it's a favor you're doing for them. It's good to be appreciative. Practice saying thank you. Oh, while you're at the meeting, the critique partner should proceed from the beginning to the end, avoiding discussion of mechanics, spelling, and grammar. You've marked up all the spelling and grammar on the paper. There's no need to spend time talking about it at the meeting. The writer will get that from the marked up papers. Focus on plot, character, point of view, and other such elements of writing. Comment only on the work, never comment on the writer. At the end of the critique, give that reviewed and marked up paper to the writer so they can take it home and incorporate those changes into their work. Again, at the meeting, your comments should be honest and positive and constructive. They should not be personal. You should definitely include things that you liked. It would be a shame if you saw something that was really wonderful in the story and the author went back and changed it because they didn't get any commentary on it. Don't try to problem solve unless you're asked. If the author says, well, you don't like crossbows, what do you like instead? Then the door has been opened and you can give your suggestions. Comment only on the work and never comment on the writer. If this sounds like I'm repeating myself, I am, and I'm doing it because it bears repeating. Your author should be working on their storyboard and should stick to it. You have a copy of the author's storyboard, and you should be familiar with it. As I say here, the authors can be creative. They may stray from their storyboard, and if they do, they should update their storyboard after the fact. If they're constantly getting away from their storyboard, they may want to go back and restructure their storyboard and make sure that their story is going the way they want it to. This pretty much sums up how to do a great critique the Agile Writer way. What follows comes from the book The Writing and Critique Group Survival Guide by Becky Levine. We recommend this book highly. It's a great book on critique and a good overview of what to look for when you're writing your work. Sometimes when critiquing someone's work, there may be a problem with the plot. For example, the story moves too slowly, you don't feel any tension, events feel disconnected, or the story feels too light or shallow. If you're confused by the story action or you forget about the hero, or you're bored or frustrated, this could be because the hero doesn't pursue a goal, or the plot doesn't present the hero with enough obstacles. The actions and events happen without a story reason, or subplots are missing or disconnected from the main plot. All of these should have been solved with your storyboard, and Agile writers usually don't have too much of a problem with plot. Hopefully you aren't having any of these problems, but if you do come across these problems, you definitely need to let the author know. Character. If you're getting bored with what the characters are saying, or you lose track of what character you're reading about, if you're getting angry or frustrated with the character, or if you find it very easy to put the book down, it could be because the character isn't complex enough, or the characters don't show enough reaction, or a character behaves inconsistently or doesn't grow. Again, these are things that should have been covered during the storyboard. Point of view issues, the weak spots. If you feel confused about who's talking, if you feel like you're listening to the author and not the narrator, or you feel distant from the story, if you're not interested in the hero, if you have trouble digging into a scene, or you're not having an emotional response to the story, or you feel like you're being lectured to, these could all be because the point of view character knows more than he or she possibly can, or the narrator's voice isn't distinct enough, or the transition between multiple points of view is unclear or rough, or maybe the narrator drops out of voice. These are all problems with point of view. Dialogue problems. You may notice that you didn't care what the characters are saying, or you can't picture the conversation in your mind. You may feel as if you're watching two talking heads with no emotion or action. You're irritated at what the characters are or are not saying, or you lose track of the story while reading the dialogue. Maybe you get confused about who's speaking. These are all dialogue problems and could be caused by the dialogue not contributing to another story element, or maybe the dialogue dumps information on the reader, or the dialogue beats are absent or weak, or perhaps the dialogue doesn't show conflict or tension. These are all dialogue problems. During the description, some of the narration points, if you feel distracted or lost in the words, or you get bored, or you forget what's happening in the story, or you feel disconnected from the narrator, or if you feel like the story has slowed down too much, these could be caused because the description has too many details, or it doesn't evoke or an image or feeling, or the setting isn't active, or perhaps the character description lacks personality. When writing scenes, you may get bored by the events in the scene, or you don't care about the characters of the events that are happening around them. You get distracted from the overall storyline, or you feel like the characters are just killing time, or you start to wonder what's for dinner. These could be caused because the scene doesn't advance the overall plot, or the tension doesn't increase across the scene. Or maybe the author has written a summary rather than a scene, or the scene starts or ends in the wrong place. There's a great book on scene called Make a Scene by Jordan Rosenfeld that we've read at Agile Writers, which has been wonderful for us in describing how to write a great scene. We highly recommend it. Okay, this brings us to the end of our seminar on how to critique the Agile Writer way. Remember, the purpose of critique is to get feedback, to improve your craft, and to improve your work. Before the critique meeting, you should format your work appropriately. Send your work to your partners ahead of time. 3 days is good. Read your partner's work, then be constructive and positive and honest in your comments. At the meeting, take turns commenting on each person's work. Be firm and fair. Be constructive. Never personal. Comment only on the work and not on the person. Try not to problem solve for the author. Give the author your comments on paper and mind the time so that everyone gets equal attention. I hope you found this seminar on Agile Writer Critique valuable. I'm always looking forward for your comments. If you have some, please send them to me at greg@agilewriters.com and I will get back to you. And then we'll see you at the next seminar.